There are moments when awareness feels less like a blessing and more like a fracture. You wake up one morning and realize that you can't unsee the world the way it really is. You can no longer hide behind small talk or pretend that other people's masks are real. You look around, and it feels as if everyone is sleepwalking, holding their breath under the weight of things they've agreed not to feel. And you, the one who notices, are suddenly set apart. Carl Jung called this the birth of differentiated consciousness, the moment a human being stops belonging completely to the collective dream. It happens quietly, a conversation that feels false, a smile that doesn't match the eyes, a strange heaviness that follows you home from a room that looked cheerful on the surface. It begins as sensitivity but grows into sight. You no longer sense just emotions. You read entire systems of tension motives and unspoken truths. At first you try to explain it. You think it's empathy, intuition, maybe overthinking. But deep down you know something irreversible has happened. You've crossed a threshold the world around you doesn't even know exists. Jung once described a woman who could walk into a place and immediately know who was pretending to be happy, who was quietly unraveling, who carried guilt like perfume. She wasn't delusional. She was simply conscious in a world addicted to blindness. Her sensitivity wasn't sickness, it was evolution ahead of schedule. But that clarity came with a cost. She couldn't stay in shallow conversations. They bruised her mind. She couldn't keep jobs that demanded silence in the face of hypocrisy. Even love became a battlefield between what she saw and what others denied. People pulled away from her not because she was wrong, but because she reflected too much truth. Jung wrote that she was not unstable, only too aware for social survival. You know that loneliness, don't you? The ache of being awake among the asleep. You try to dim your awareness to be normal, to fit the mold of easy laughter and partial truths. But pretending ignorance feels like suffocation. You were not built to live half asleep. The more you see, the more the world resists your seeing. When you notice what others ignore, you become a mirror they can't bear to look into. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. So they turn on the mirror. They call you critical, negative, intense. They accuse you of causing the discomfort you simply revealed. This is the first punishment of perception projection. Others project their unacknowledged darkness onto you. When they sense that you perceive their hidden motives, they defend not against you, but against the truth reflected through you. It's not malice, it's fear. The psyche protects itself by destroying what threatens its illusion. You've likely felt this, the sudden chill in a friend's tone after you speak. What you feel, the subtle hostility that follows, honesty. The way light conversation dies when you name the tension in the air. They don't know they're defending the shadow. They just know that you see too much. The cost of sight is misunderstanding. Jung warned that people with heightened perception live as exiles in their own culture. They belong to humanity's future, but must survive its present. When the unconscious becomes too conscious, he wrote, the world withdraws its hand. So how do you live among those who can't bear the light that guides you? You begin by learning boundaries, not walls that shut out compassion, but edges that keep empathy from drowning you. Jung called it conscious discrimination, the ability to recognize what is yours and what is borrowed. Every feeling that enters you is not your own. Every heaviness you carry does not belong to you. Spend time alone until the borrowed energies settle. In silence, the foreign dissolves, and your own voice returns. It will feel fragile at first, like a candle in wind, but it's the center you've been missing. Awareness without center becomes torment. Awareness rooted in self becomes vision. Still, even as you reclaim that center, another truth emerges. You cannot see the darkness in others without first seeing it in yourself. The shadow you expose in them is a twin of the one you've buried. You know deceit because you've lied. You know arrogance because you've tasted it. You recognize fear because it speaks your mother tongue. This realization humbles you. It cuts the judgment out of your seeing. What was once accusation turns to understanding. Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. In that mirror of recognition, your gift begins to purify. It was never meant to make you superior. It was meant to make you human. The woman in Jung's study eventually learned that truth. After years of struggle, she stopped trying to see less and began learning how to see wisely. She found work that used her perception to help others. She stopped carrying what wasn't hers. Her awareness didn't shrink, it softened. That is the path before you, not blindness, but refinement. The world doesn't need fewer people who see. It needs seers who can love what they see. There will still be days when the noise of humanity crushes your senses, when every conversation feels like a storm, when solitude calls like salvation. But know this, withdrawal is only meant for recovery, not for escape. You retreat to remember who you are, then you return to serve. Because perception is service. It reveals where healing must begin. When used with compassion, it becomes light for others stumbling in the dark. You were never cursed with awareness. You were entrusted with it. And the trust is this: to remain kind, while being awake to see deeply, and still forgive. In that balance between sight and grace, Jung saw the next step of human evolution. He believed that individuals like you are consciousness itself, experimenting with expansion. Maybe that's why you've always felt older than your years, heavier in spirit, quietly aware of patterns long before they unfold. You are not wrong for sensing more. You are simply attuned to what humanity will one day call normal. It's a lonely gift now, but gifts often arrive disguised as burdens. And if you can carry it without resentment, if you can hold both vision and gentleness, then your awareness will stop being a wound and start becoming wisdom. That is the real work, not to turn away from the world, but to stay open enough to heal it. And somewhere within you, a voice older than time already knows how. There comes a point when the world's noise becomes unbearable. Every conversation feels layered with tension. Every smile hides a story you can almost hear. You start avoiding crowds, not because you dislike people, but because you can't stop feeling them. You notice the way their energy presses against your skin, the way their unspoken pain seeps into your chest. It's not imagination, it's sensitivity without filters. Jung called it participation mystique, that psychic entanglement where you unconsciously merge with the emotional field of everyone around you. You stop being a separate self and become a vessel for collective moods. One day you wake up exhausted, carrying sadness you can't name, anger that doesn't belong to you, fear that entered your mind like smoke through a window left open too long. You think something's wrong with you, but it's not wrongness, it's overexposure. You are tuned to frequencies others can't hear. Without boundaries, you become an instrument the world plays without consent. Jung observed that people with heightened intuition often mistake absorption for empathy. They think they're helping, but in truth, they're drowning. Compassion without separation becomes possession. The cure is not to close your heart, it's to remember it has walls. He taught his patients to anchor consciousness through solitude. Not isolation born of bitterness, but deliberate withdrawal into silence. 10 minutes of stillness a day, he said, can save a soul that sees too much. In quiet, what is foreign loosens its grip. Your awareness, once scattered, gathers again like light pulled into focus. When you return to the world, you see more clearly where you end and others begin. That boundary is not cruelty, it's clarity. It's what keeps perception from turning into psychosis. Jung mapped 3 great dangers for people who see deeply collective disruption, psychological isolation, and identity dissolution. You've already tasted each. Collective disruption happens when you refuse to maintain the illusions that keep groups together. Every family, company, or culture survives by agreeing not to notice certain truths. When you break that agreement, when you say the quiet part aloud, you become the fracture line. Others label you the problem because your honesty shakes their foundation. But you are not the problem. You are the pressure that exposes the cracks already there. Psychological isolation follows close behind. You try to share your insight and meet only blank stares or discomfort. Jung called it the curse of consciousness. It cannot be shared with those who do not possess it. So you learn to stay silent. You smile when others gossip, nod when they avoid depth. But deep inside you ache for someone who can meet your gaze without flinching. The silence grows heavy until you mistake it for madness. Yet you are not insane. You are simply early. Awareness always arrives before understanding, and then comes the most dangerous one: identity dissolution. When you spend too long absorbing collective emotion, you begin to lose the edges of self. You don't know what you feel anymore. You become a mirror reflecting everyone else's image. Jung called this psychological annihilation the death of individuality under the weight of collective possession. It's the mind's quiet suicide. To prevent it, he prescribed individuation, the slow, sacred process of becoming yourself while remaining part of the whole. Not escape from humanity, but conscious participation within it. He described 3 movements in this inner work. First, recognition and differentiation. Recognize when what you feel is not yours. Differentiate between personal emotion and absorbed atmosphere. This is not detachment, it's awareness. In solitude, emotions begin to separate like oil from water. What remains clear and steady beneath the turbulence that is you. Second, shadow integration. Seeing others' darkness means you must face your own. The anger you detect, the deceit you sense, the fear you pity all live somewhere within you. To perceive is to participate. Jung warned that moral purity is often a disguise for unconscious shadow. Real integrity begins. Admit that you too are capable of everything you condemn. Only then does sight become compassion instead of criticism. Third, conscious participation. Once you know who you are and what you carry, you can engage the collective without losing your balance. You stop absorbing and start translating. You hold others' emotions long enough to understand but not long enough to drown. Jung called this building psychological containers, inner structures strong enough to carry another's pain without mistaking it for your own. When awareness learns containment, perception becomes alchemy. What once overwhelmed you begins to transform. You no longer recoil from pain. You read it. You no longer fear conflict. You interpret its language. You become fluent in the unconscious. Jung's own life mirrored this exact transformation. After breaking from Freud, he was pulled into visions so intense he thought he was losing his mind. He saw floods, serpents, burning cities, symbols of a psyche expanding beyond its limits. He later called it his confrontation with the unconscious. For 6 years, he lived at the edge of reason, writing, drawing, painting what he saw. Those pages became the Red Book, the map of a man surviving enlightenment. Through that descent, he realized something profound. What looks like breakdown is often breakthrough in disguise. Consciousness expands through chaos. Every psyche that sees too much must first shatter the old container before finding a new one wide enough to hold what it knows. That's why you shouldn't fear your sensitivity. It's not weakness. It's the psyche's attempt to evolve. You are feeling the pressure of growth the world has not yet matched. The isolation, the exhaustion, the longing for people who understand. It's all part of the metamorphosis. Jung said that every era gives birth to a few who carry the next stage of consciousness. They feel the collective crisis first as anxiety, depression, or alienation. They are the nervous system of humanity sensing the future before it arrives. If you've ever wondered why the world's pain feels personal, that's why. You are registering the unconscious of your time. The wars, the noise, the disconnection, they echo inside you not because you're fragile, but because you're connected. But connection without grounding destroys. So Jung insisted on the necessity of community, not crowds, but kindred souls. He called them the few who understand. You don't need many, 1 or 2 is enough. People who don't flinch when you speak honestly. People who don't confuse your insight with arrogance. People who can stand in the presence of your clarity without shrinking from their own. He said the individuated recognize each other instantly, like 2 mirrors finally meeting their reflection. Between them, words become optional. There's just presence and peace. With such souls, perception finds safety. Awareness becomes shared instead of solitary. It turns from burden to bridge. Still, not everyone can handle what you see. That's why Jung advised gradual revelation. Don't throw your truth at the unready. Offer it gently. Test for curiosity before depth. Give people the choice to meet you halfway. Truth, when forced, becomes violence. When invited, it becomes light. Your role is not to awaken everyone. Your role is to stay awake yourself. Because consciousness spreads not through argument, but through example. Jung believed that a single individuated person radiates balance into the collective unconscious. They don't preach, they stabilize. Their very being becomes medicine for the culture's confusion. You are one of those stabilizers. The heaviness you feel is not only your own, it's the weight of the world's unprocessed awareness pressing against your nervous system. But it's through you that this awareness begins to take shape. Find words, find form. Do not run from that responsibility. Carry it with humility. It's what you were made for. And maybe that's why you're hearing this now, because something in you is ready to stop apologizing for being awake. There is a moment in every awakening when the storm quiets. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. You stop fighting the weight of perception. You stop trying to close your eyes. The noise of the collective still hums around you, but it no longer enters you the same way. You start to realize that seeing is not the problem. How you hold what you see is. Jung said that consciousness matures through 4 transformations. The first is recognition without overwhelm. Accepting that what you sense is real without collapsing under it. The second is integration without isolation. Staying connected while maintaining inner independence. The third is service without sacrifice. Using your vision to heal without emptying yourself. And the final one is legacy without attachment. Letting your light shape the future without needing credit for its glow. This is the slow, invisible ascent after the descent into awareness. The climb back from the underworld with your hands full of meaning. You learn that every insight, no matter how painful, carries a seed of transformation. You stop fearing darkness because you've seen what grows in it. You stop worshiping light because you know it blinds as easily as it reveals. You walk the thin line between both, becoming what Jung called the living bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. But even now, traps remain subtle, seductive ones that every perceptive soul must recognize. The first is Jung. Inflation. It happens when awareness hardens into identity. You start believing that seeing deeply makes you special, that others' blindness confirms your superiority. You start talking in absolutes. Helping turns into preaching. Jung warned that the ego which identifies with an archetype becomes possessed by it. Inflation feels like power, but it's only expansion without depth, a balloon destined to burst. The antidote is humility, remembering that you are a channel, not the source. Light passes through you. It is not yours to own. The second trap is withdrawal. The temptation to retreat completely, to say the world is too unconscious, I'm done. It feels noble, even spiritual, but it's despair in disguise. True individuation does not hide from life, it engages it more consciously. The hermit who runs from humanity hasn't transcended it. He's been defeated by it. Jung said the self isn't discovered in isolation, but in relationship. Consciousness must circulate to stay alive. The third trap is from the helper's illusion. The need to save others to justify your gift. You begin defining yourself through the problems you fix. You take responsibility for everyone's awakening, forgetting your own. Slowly, the self disappears behind the savior mask. Jung saw it constantly in therapists, healers, prophets. When perception becomes identity, he wrote, the person disappears behind the function. The cure is to remember that service is an act of sharing, not self-erasure. And finally, the return of overwhelm. Integration is not permanent. Life will test every boundary you build. In seasons of grief, fatigue, or loss, the flood returns. You start absorbing again, losing the edges you fought so hard to define. But this time you recognize it sooner. You rest, recalibrate, rebuild. Growth, Jung said, is a spiral. You return to old places, but with new eyes. To sustain this dance, you need rhythm, solitude, to empty connection, to refill creation, to transform. Jung called these containers for the soul. They are the scaffolding that holds the expanding structure of awareness. Without them, insight becomes pressure. With them, it becomes art. That is why the highly perceptive must create. Writing, painting, composing, walking in nature, anything that gives shape to the invisible. Creativity is how the unconscious breathes through you without destroying you. It's the alchemy that turns chaos into clarity. Jung himself survived his greatest darkness through creation. When the visions threatened to devour him, he drew mandala circles that mirrored the order his psyche sought. My mandalas were cryptograms, he said, of the state of myself. Each one brought him closer to balance. In that act of making, he discovered that the path of the seer is not to explain the unconscious, but to cooperate with it. And so you learn to cooperate with what you see. You let it move through you, but you don't let it live. As you become a translator of symbols, not their prisoner. The unconscious stops haunting you because you give it a voice. The chaos stops chasing you because you've invited it to speak. This is where the burden transforms into service. You start using perception, not to expose, but to understand. You see the patterns behind conflict and turn them into wisdom. You sense others' pain and respond with presence instead of panic. You stop trying to fix people and they begin to heal in your calm. That's how perception matures. It becomes compassion with structure. Jung believed that individuals who reach this stage become what he called culture carriers. They embody the consciousness their time secretly needs. They don't shout their insights. They live them. Their clarity destabilizes illusions simply by existing. The individual, Jung wrote, is the carrier of the living spirit, the one who brings change to society. It's no longer about you then. Your sight becomes collective medicine. You sense the undercurrents of your generation, the anxiety, the despair, the hunger for meaning, and you metabolize them. You speak what others can't yet articulate. You become the nervous system of the world, learning to feel itself. But for this to work, you must guard your vessel. Even light burns through a cracked lens. Self-care is not indulgence for people like you, it's calibration. You cleanse the lens so perception remains pure. You rest, you limit exposure, you forgive yourself for being human. Eventually, awareness becomes effortless. You no longer strain to see, you simply are the seeing. The world keeps its illusions, but they no longer hook you. You can look at darkness without judgment, at ignorance without contempt, at chaos without fear. That is the moment consciousness fulfills its purpose through you. Remember the woman from Jung's early writings, the one whose sensitivity once destroyed her peace. After years of integration, she no longer feared her gift. She became a counselor using her perception to guide others gently toward truth. People who once avoided her sought her presence. They said being around her felt like standing near a calm fire, warm, illuminating, safe. Jung wrote that she learned not to see less, but to see more wisely. That wisdom is your destination too. To see without losing heart. To know without losing humility. To witness the collective madness and still choose tenderness. The danger of seeing everything was never that you'd see too much. It was that you'd never learn to see with love. When you do, perception stops being isolation and becomes communion. You no longer carry the world, you walk with it. You stop fearing sensitivity as curse and recognize it as responsibility. This is what Jung meant by conscious evolution. The world awakens one aware heart at a time, and those hearts, yours among them, are building the bridge between what humanity is and what it's becoming. So stay with the light even when it burns. Stay with the truth even when it isolates. Stay with yourself even when the world cannot yet meet your eyes. Because consciousness is patient, and it chose you for a reason. You were never meant to escape this world. You were meant to help it see.